Oh my word, dude, Crone is dropping the bombs on us. We have CDL intel dropping all the intel on our timelines, man. ROSTERMANIA has been in full swing for a while now, and we finally have real news about basically every team in the CDL. 10 of the 12 have legit intel, and even a little bit more on Paris as well. So there's a lot to go through here. So I don't even know where to begin. Basically, here's where our rosters were. Our predictions, at least heading into today from the podcast yesterday. Spoiler, still a really great conversation with I Hold Shift on the podcast yesterday. So make sure to go check that out. We talk everything challengers, some of the most deserving players, which are guys who we're going to talk about here with Paris and NRG as well. We have some of the rosters right. I mean, from Crone's intel, he dropped nuke after nuke on us with some of these rosters. So first of all, he believes that Toronto is staying the same with this CleanX roster. There were rumors that he was looking for the bag from other teams, but it sounds like maybe Toronto gave him the bag and he's gonna be staying with that roster, that core four. Sounds like Minnesota is staying the same as well, which is what we had going in here. Of course, we still have the OpTic Dallas roster. We have, of course, FaZe. And that brings us to the absolutely nuts rosters here in ROSTERMANIA. So let me grab this and so we can make sure to read through this, make sure we got them all here. So off the rip here, we need to get some guys on the bench here because these teams are switching up. We'll start with the Seattle Surge roster. We got Accuracy, Pred, Sib, and Max. So we're gonna go through the intel here and then talk about these teams. All right, so we're gonna set it up and then break them down. Accuracy on mania makes sense. Sib on Flex, I mean, makes sense. He's a big time talent. He was re-signed or extended by FaZe. So there's gonna be some sort of transaction there with acquiring Sib from Atlanta FaZe. Everyone talks about his natural talent as an AR. He's the guy that, you know, the reputation in the scene though is that he can be a little bit fiery, that he can be hard to predict, that he can be a tough teammate. He has a little bit of an ego according to, like, you know, the community. Obviously, this is all from what the community believes. I don't really have any interaction with Sib, and I don't really know how he is as a teammate, but that is kind of the idea from a lot of the other amateurs in the scene, that it can be hard to team with a guy like him because of his approach to the game. So that would be an interesting aspect. So him and Accuracy, also all of the connections to NYSL on this team with Mac and Accuracy teaming together last year, and then Sib and Accuracy seem to be friends, or I mean Sib and Mac seem to be friends, and then you throw in the wild card with Pred. Pred, of course, has been the winningest player in APAC, which is the Australian scene, for the past 2 years on Renegades in that squad. What's interesting about him though is that, you know, obviously the talent pool in Australia is nowhere near what it's been in the United States or in EU the past 2 years. The only time we've seen him play against anybody in EU or NA was on the kickoff event of Modern Warfare. So it's been a minute since we saw Pred play on LAN. They finished top 6 at that event. To be fair, Pred did shine a lot in that event in some impressive series, but again, top 6 isn't an ideal situation for a guy like that. Obviously, it's hard to say exactly how good he's going to be, but everybody, when you're watching him, you see a really talented Call of Duty player. But again, it's hard to judge and gauge considering the talent pool in APAC, which I personally believe he deserves a shot in the CDL. So this is really fun. And it'll be interesting to see who they sign as a substitute for this squad. But this also puts Mac on SMG, which people have been freaking out about on Twitter. I don't see that as big of a deal as other people. To be fair, in Cold War at least, he was definitely a better AR than he was an SMG. So that's why people are thinking that. But in Modern Warfare, he was a better SMG than he was an AR. Our sample size is small and we're heading into a Modern Warfare more like game. So I think taking the risk on Mac as an SMG makes sense for this team. It's so hard to say where this team would stack up against some of these other star-studded rosters that we're about to show here. So that's what gets interesting, to say the least. They could be a top 6 team, but they could also be one of the worst teams in the CDL. There's so many question marks with Pred coming over, with Sib and his attitude, with Accuracy and coming back in the CDL now off the bench from Rocker. Can there be enough slaying power with Accuracy? How's the S&D for Accuracy now? How's it going to stack up this year in a Modern Warfare-esque game? So there's a lot of question marks with this team, but I think it's very interesting to say the least. That comes to our roster with the New York squad, which in the podcast yesterday from our predictions, we predicted Crim, Clay, Hydra, and Neptune. And Crone confirmed it, that's the direction we are headed. This team is fiery. I am all in on a team like this with a duo of Hydra and Neptune kind of being coached by both Crim and Clay. Obviously, this team resembles so much, with Neptune being the Shotzzy, the Halo guy, the movement, the high upside gun skill. Same thing with Hydra. We've seen insane upside from a guy like him as well. And so having Crim and Clay there, really reuniting the Empire magic, I really do think it could work. The question is, can Clay and Crim keep up the pace and keep up that AR slang? And depends on the meta. Do we have a 3 SMG meta? Do we have a 2 AR meta? And then that would kind of affect how Crim plays around the map. Obviously, we've seen him be a good overall flex. We saw him do a great job as a flex last year with Dallas. So this team has a ton of upside. Can Neptune and Hydra go toe-to-toe with the likes of a team like FaZe? I think they can. Then the question is, can Celium and, Arctides, how does that match up with Crim and Clay? And can you keep those guys in the same ballpark while letting your SMGs run free? I think it's possible, at least. And then it comes down to the X's and O's of teamwork and search and destroy to be the X factor for a team to beat FaZe, which I think is very possible. So I'm a big fan of this NYSL team with Neptune on the squad. Of course, he's coming over from Florida. So we still have to talk about Florida, LA Thieves, Guerrillas, as all the news came through. So absolutely insane. The timeline's going nuts for the New York stuff. And then LAG, let's talk about them real quick, man. Crone dropped the bomb on this one. So he had Slasher, Gunless, Hook, and Asim. Hook is the guy here. So we thought that Asim was very possible. We had Slasher and Gunless on LAG already, kind of with that Rise duo. But what we didn't see coming was the Envy Slasher Hook combo in World War II, which is exciting to see him come over here. We had Hook going to Florida, which seemed very possible, and I'm surprising Florida's letting it happen. But Hook and Asim is a really fun SMG duo. I think this team has a ton of upside. Slasher, I thought we saw a really impressive Slasher at CoD Champs, who played very, very well, and even individually in Stage 5, even though they had, all those problems with Hook. But Slasher coming back and teaming with Hook is really spicy. I didn't think that was something that we'd see happen after the whole situation with Hook on LAT and him kind of dropping the ball there with the COVID stuff and all of that and getting benched, which I assume Slasher had a big hand in that as well. So overall, I was really surprised to see this, but this team has, again, this is a really good squad of 4 too. We have this team, New York, Rocker, Dallas, Ultra, FaZe. That's a really built out top 6. And we haven't even talked about LA Thieves yet. So this LA Thieves team, it's happening. This is what we had on the podcast yesterday, and Crone confirmed that here. So that's exciting. It makes sense after what Zuma had shown on the flank with Envoy's mom and the Astro situation. Makes sense that Envoy would try to find a way to play with Kenny, Octane, Jiraza. That is an insanely talented team. The question marks would be the teamwork and the long-term sustainability of a squad like this, but I really like the idea of, well, we'll see if it's either Kenny or Jiraza running the SMG. I would lean Kenny running an SMG in this situation, but having those two kind of fly in front of Jiraza and Octane, that's a really good squad, man. And we have a really impressive top 6 or 7 squads here. And that's why the Surge squad is such an X factor with Accuracy, Sib, and then Pred and Mac. And that becomes interesting. And we haven't even talked about London yet, man, because this London team, we had Harry being the 4th here, but Crone dropped the bomb that is looking like it's going to be Gizmo. And so looks like Gizmo is going to be the 4th here. And again, man, this team, I really like this team. This has the X factors, all of the build to be a dark horse team in a Modern Warfare type game. And Afro, I've been really high on him this year. I think he has all the potential in the world to be a top 15 player in the CDL. Nasty showed so much potential in the EU scene. This team is such a dark horse team. I could see them being a top 6 type team, top 5 type team maybe. But when you consider some of these other rosters, it's hard to see them right away being that top 5 team. But this is a team that if they stay together, could be right there with the best of them in the middle of the year for sure. So we can talk more about these teams in a second, but the wild cards here now is Florida. So the rumor is that Dave Patty is going to be headed to Florida, and it sounds like Havoc or a Yeez is going to be their 4th. which means Vivid is hitting the bench. And this is probably the biggest surprise by far to me at this point, because you have some, I mean, look at the guys at the bottom of this screen. It's stacked down there with talent. And Dave Patty being the guy, he doesn't have a picture on Gamepedia, so we're just gonna have to throw him in here. Dave Patty being the third there is a little surprising, considering we've seen Dave run quite a bit of AR in his career, so it's kind of like a flex. So if that means Big Wake would be heading down to the SMG, or if Dave would be running the SMG, that's interesting, to say the least. And then the rumor is, you know, with either Yeez or Havoc, and it sounds like CDL Intel is leaning Havoc as the fourth. That is questionable. I'm surprised when you had, you know, Vivid as an option here, unless Vivid doesn't want to play with them. But I mean, I feel like Vivid would take, if this is the situation, Vivid would take the opportunity if they wanted to play with them. So for me, that's really surprising to pass on a guy like Vivid in that situation, unless they really believe in what Havoc is bringing to the squad. But even then maybe you just go Vivid over Dave Patty, and then that's kind of what happens. That's shocking to me. Otherwise, it's Yeez, which I think the high upside play of that would be really fun too. So I'm really surprised that like Dave Patty's getting the opportunity over a guy like Vivid in that situation. It comes down to what they believe about both those guys running the SMG. That's not as high upside of a play as I was hoping to see from, you know, two unbelievably talented players in Skies and Awakening. Again, I think Skies is a top 15 player in the CDL with the upside of being top 6 on a consistent basis if he has the right team around him. So man, it's a little bit weird. I don't necessarily love that. So then the question would be, well, what happens with the Legion squad? What happens with the NRG squad? Well, the spot. That's a whole question in itself. I think we're not going to hear anything from the NRG situation or that Chicago spot for quite a long time. I mean, Krim said we might not hear anything about that for 2 months. And that's what we talked about in the podcast yesterday, and the potential and how that whole situation unfolded, which again, still shout out the podcast, go watch it, because we talked a lot about all these other rosters, the potential of the Rockers staying together, the OpTic Dallas team and the high upside potential and where they lay in this whole situation. So it gets crazy, man. I think I'm gonna have to do a power rankings video, a hot takes power rankings video with these rosters here. My first thought with the Legion would be that they pick up a full squad. And I think, so we talked about this on the podcast yesterday, and the odds, which is, again, this is ironic considering what went down on Twitter the past 2 weeks. But I think this is very possible where they just full on pick up the BBG roster and just pick up these guys and just go bang, BBG squad, the Built by Gamers squad from this year in the NA team. I think it's very possible. They announced that Theory is still their coach. And also, also Florida announced that Atura is not going to be coaching them next year, which is surprising, but just overall interesting to say the least. So I think this is also very possible. I could also see a world where a guy like Harry ends up on the squad and you go like a half NA, half EU team. Otherwise, they go for the brand and they give Scraps and Wuskin the chance again, and they just go Scraps, Wuskin, and then they pick up, you know, 2 American players, and you pick up Vivid and you give a go with Vivid and Paul. So like, let's say you let Paul flex, and then it's Vivid and Wuskin, and then Scraps is the main AR, Scraps is the main SMG with Vivid, and then you have Wuskin being the main AR, so then Harry's back in the AM scene. I could see that being a thing as well. So any of those situations are very, very possible, and I wouldn't be surprised at that at all. Paul and Vivid feel like that would be a lock for a duo. So my idea would be that maybe you have like a Paul, Vivid, and then maybe you pull Zaptius into that team. Where is Zaptius? Here he is. Zaptius, and then you have a Zaptius Vivid duo. I don't know how Paul feels about Aqua, because I could see Aqua being the main AR coming back to Paris, and then that being the team would be really, really interesting. We also saw them talking a lot about Tej, so I could see Tej and Vivid in some sense doing something there with Paul. That could be an option. And then Pristini not getting a roster would be mind-blowing to me, so maybe you go Pristini, Vivid, Paul, and then you go a fourth. So those are all possible, but man, the idea that we could end up with a roster like that is pretty mind-blowing to me. And I would lean to be like half European, half American, I'd imagine. These could go any which way at this point. NRG could then just pick up that BBG squad then in that case, or, you know, whoever ends up being that extra squad or the expansion team, whether that's Rise or Cloud9, anyone, it could be anyone, or one of the OWL teams like anyone could be that situation as well. So those are all possible, and you're gonna have to keep our eye on those situations. So all of these guys would be very possible, but man, there's only 8 spots left at this point. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 22, 23 guys that have a real chance. And then not to mention like exotic or royalty or any Saints, any of those guys who had great seasons in the amateur scene, not to mention Yeez or John or legends like that. Vortex, I could see Vortex on Paris as well. I could see bids on Paris as well. All of those guys are very possible. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this roster mania breakdown. I mean, we're going to talk a lot more about these rosters over the coming few weeks. So make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload, because a lot more could change and we can get some more announcements at any point. And not to mention, you know, we do the tips and tricks around here. We do learn from the pros, the breakdowns, all that stuff on this channel. Not to mention all of the other COD League content and gameplays on the gaming channel. The Black Ops 2 video came out. We'll be doing more on the gaming channel as well. So anyway, like, comment, subscribe, share the video if you guys really enjoyed it. But as always, guys, I'm your boy SalvationsElite, and guys, we will see ya next time. I'm out.